I work in demolition. Not the kind where you swing a wrecking ball into glass skyscrapers. Think creepier, quieter. Rotting structures that haven't seen a human footprint in decades. The ones still standing, but begging to collapse. That's where we come in. In early October of 2021, my crew and I got a contract to begin prepping St. Elora's Memorial Hospital in upstate Pennsylvania for demolition. You might have heard the name in one of those old Urban Explorer YouTube channels. The hospital was shut down in the mid-90s due to structural and financial instability, but local rumors said something different. Nurses that disappeared, operating rooms that lights flickered in long after the electricity was supposedly shut off. Classic small-town horror lore, the kind you're supposed to laugh off over beers. Except what happened to us wasn't a story. It was real. And I still wake up sweating with that metallic basement smell in my nostrils. St. Elora's was a 6-story monolith of decay, wrapped in ivy and broken windows. We started at the top, working floor by floor. Most of it was uneventful, just collapsing tiles, rotted walls, and the occasional raccoon skeleton in a vent shaft. But it was when we reached the basement that things started to shift. There were 2 basement levels. The first housed old laundry machines, broken gurneys, and some abandoned wheelchairs. But the second was where they kept the morgue. My foreman, Rick, told me to take inventory down there. He said, just check for anything salvageable and make sure we're not going to collapse into any sinkholes if we bring heavy equipment down. I didn't argue. I took my flashlight and a portable radio and headed down the rusted stairwell. The second basement was colder. The air changed, heavier somehow. Each step down, my boots echoed too loud, like the place hadn't heard noise in years and was protesting its return. When I reached the morgue level, the walls were covered in peeling green tile, and the smell was something I can't describe. Not rot, not mold, something older, like the scent of forgotten things. My radio buzzed static, then Rick's voice came through faintly. You down there yet? I pressed the button. Just got here. A second of silence. Thought I heard someone else with you. I froze. No, I said, trying to sound casual. Just me down here. That's when I heard it. A metal drawer sliding shut. I swung my flashlight toward the row of body storage tablets. They were old, steel boxes with tags still taped to the outside. I stepped closer, my breath visible in the cold air now, even though it wasn't that cold above. One of the doors. It wasn't shut all the way. I approached it slowly, every step echoing like gunshots in that dead silence. The drawer was slightly ajar, just enough to cast a narrow shadow on the floor. I grabbed the handle, and before I could think better of it, yanked it open. Empty. No body, no sheet, just dust and rust stains. I exhaled sharply, letting out a laugh I didn't really feel. Maybe the weight shifted over the years. Maybe gravity gave up trying to move. I turned to walk away when the drawer beside it opened on its own. It didn't slide out fast like in the movies. It creaked, groaned like it hurt the metal to move. Inside was a single Polaroid photo, curled at the edges from time. I pulled it out with gloved fingers and turned it toward my light. It was a woman lying on a gurney in the same morgue room I was standing in, pale, eyes open, but not in shock or terror, They looked hollow, lifeless. In the corner of the photo, someone had scribbled in pen, "She wouldn't stay dead." I should have left right then. I know that, but something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe fear of Rick thinking I was a coward, pushed me forward. I kept exploring. There was a surgery prep room connected to the morgue. I walked in and immediately wished I hadn't. The floor was sticky. The sink was still filled with something thick and dark. The operating table in the center had leather restraints on all four corners, cracked with age. Then the lights came on. Every bulb in the ceiling, fluorescent, long dead, flickered to life like they'd just been waiting for someone to walk in. My radio screeched static. Then a voice I didn't recognize came through. "She's still here." I turned and ran. I didn't wait for an explanation. I didn't care if Rick thought I was crazy. I ran past the body drawers, past the photo that somehow was now gone from my hand, up the stairs 2 at a time until I burst through the door into the first basement level gasping. Rick was waiting for me at the top of the stairs. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. I lied. He didn't ask questions, but I saw the way he looked at me. Like maybe he already knew something about that place he hadn't told me. We came back the next day to seal off the lower basement. Rick said it was unstable, not worth the risk. But I knew better. On the door leading down to the morgue, someone had spray-painted a warning. "She still breathes." I asked Rick if it was some kid vandalizing before we got there. He said no. He said I saw it appear on the door overnight on the security cam. There was no footage of anyone coming or going. No one's touched the lower level since. The building's scheduled for demolition next year, but I'm not going back. Because some nights, when everything is still and I tune my portable radio just right, I hear the drawer sliding open again. And I remember that photo, the woman's eyes, and the words, "She wouldn't stay dead."
This story came from a friend of mine, Nadia. She's a freelance photographer who takes photos of abandoned buildings, mostly for history blogs and dark tourism websites. She's got the kind of nerves you wish you had, calm, methodical, never spooked. Or she used to be that way. The last time I saw her, she looked like a ghost herself. Pale, eyes darting over her shoulder like she was listening for something just behind her. What she told me next changed the way I look at every abandoned structure I pass. In 2022, Nadia took a solo trip to Mercy Ridge Hospital, a crumbling facility deep in the woods of rural Ohio. Officially, it had closed in 1991 after a scandal involving missing patient records and a fire in the psychiatric wing. Unofficially, there were stories of illegal experiments, unmarked graves, and patients that weren't sick but were kept anyway. The main structure was 4 stories tall, with a collapsed west wing and an intact east corridor. Nadia arrived around 11 a.m., when the sun was high and the shadow short. She always worked during the day. "Rule number 1, she told me once, never let curiosity keep you past sundown." That day, she broke her rule. The hospital was a snapshot of decay. Moss climbed the walls, gurneys rusted in place, and medical charts still sat open on nurses' desks like someone had just stepped away. Nadia moved floor to floor, capturing the slow death of a building once filled with noise. On the third floor, she found the psych ward. The doors were heavy, built to be locked from the outside. Most were hanging off their hinges, and graffiti covered the walls, except for one room, room 313. It looked untouched, pristine almost. No graffiti, no mold. Even the glass in the door's observation window was intact. Inside sat a lone wooden chair, a thin leather strap still bolted to one armrest. Nadia raised her camera. Click. The light on her flash blinked. Then a whisper, low and sharp, right by her ear. "Don't." She spun around, expecting a trespasser, maybe another photographer. The hall was empty. She checked her phone. No service, of course, typical in buildings like this. She chalked it up to nerves and went back to room 313. Only this time, the door was open. She didn't remember it being unlocked. Still, Nadia stepped inside. The air was dry, stale like cardboard left in an attic. She noticed something odd. The dust on the floor. There were no footprints. Not hers. Not anyone's. It was like no one had entered this room in decades. She raised her camera again. Click. Another whisper, this time from inside the room. "She sees you." Nadia bolted into the hallway, heart thundering. This wasn't fun anymore. She wanted out. But when she reached the stairwell, it was gone. There was no opening, just a blank wall where she'd come up. She walked the length of the corridor, checking both ends. No stairs, no elevator, just more locked doors and windows too high and narrow to crawl through. That's when she heard the dragging. Not footsteps, something heavier, slower, like fabric sliding across tile. She ducked into a supply closet, locked the door behind her, and waited. Through the thin slit of a vent, she saw a figure move past in the hallway, not walking, but gliding. Long, pale limbs, a hospital gown soaked at the hem, hair matted and dark, trailing behind like it had never dried. And then the figure stopped, right outside the closet. Nadia stopped breathing. For what felt like 5 whole minutes, the thing stood there. Then it spoke, a voice like a breath through broken glass. "You took her picture." The lights went out. Nadia told me she doesn't remember what happened next, just that she woke up on the floor of the main lobby, hours later, with dried blood on her forehead and her camera missing. She managed to get to her car and drive off. She didn't go to the police. What could she say? That a ghost woman didn't want her picture taken? A week later, her camera showed up at her apartment's front door in a package. No return address. Inside were only 3 photos on the memory card. Room 313, empty. The hallway, dark and blurry. A close-up, Nadia, asleep, lying on the floor of the psych ward, with something standing behind her, too tall, too thin. Nadia hasn't picked up a camera since. She moved cities, changed her phone number, deleted her social media. But sometimes she tells me she still hears it. At night, just before sleep, that whisper, "You took her picture."
My uncle, Darren, was a firefighter for over 25 years. Quiet guy, tough as hell. He didn't scare easily. Not from explosions, not from the smell of burned flesh, not even from crawling into collapsing buildings. But there's one story he told me just once after a few too many drinks that made my skin crawl. It happened during a training exercise back in 2008. A rookie firefighter had gone missing near the outskirts of a decaying property during a citywide drill. The location? Hawthorne Hills Sanatorium, a long-abandoned mental health facility that had caught fire in the 1970s, killing more than 20 patients, most of them trapped in the locked psychiatric wing. The place had never been torn down. The fire gutted the west wing, but the east and south buildings still stood, brittle and blackened, like a charred skeleton, silent in the trees. The rookie's last known coordinates put him just inside the burned ward. Darren and a small search team were sent in to locate him. As soon as they entered, the air changed. It wasn't just smoky. It was stale, like time had been frozen since the fire. Layers of ash coated the floor. Their boots left clear prints with every step, revealing faded medical floor markings beneath. They called out the rookie's name, "James! James Halperin!" But there was no answer. Instead, they heard something else, a faint, banging sound, slow, rhythmic. Darren followed it toward the remains of the psychiatric block. The doors were warped and blackened from the fire, but still intact in places. He said they passed rooms where the walls were scratched from the inside, beds with melted restraints, a wheelchair fused to the floor. The banging grew louder. Then they found it. The rookie's helmet sat in the middle of the corridor. No sign of him. But next to the helmet was a door, still labeled in warped plastic lettering, "Isolation Room C." The banging was coming from inside. Darren approached, radioed in his location, and pushed the door open. The moment he stepped inside, the sound stopped. The room was scorched. Black walls, floor caved in on one side, and a single hospital bed frame, rusted and half-melted. No patient, no rookie. Just a mirror, cracked, standing in the far corner. And written across it in soot-smudged handprint were 3 words: "Stay with us." He spun around, heart racing. Behind him, the doorway was gone. Not closed. Gone. Just a solid, fire-scarred wall where the exit had been. He slammed his fists against it, screaming into his radio, but all he heard in return was static, followed by a chorus of whispers, like dozens of voices layered over each other, breathing through the speaker. "You left us here. We burned. We still feel it." The mirror flickered, not in a light way, but like the reflection was moving without him. He saw shapes behind his own reflection, limbs moving, faces half-burned, patients in hospital gowns, black-eyed, skin melted to muscle, pressing their hands against the inside of the glass like they were trying to break through from the other side. And in the center, the rookie, James Halperin. He was standing motionless, staring straight ahead, as though he couldn't see Darren at all. Then one of the burned figures whispered in James's ear, and James began to smile. Darren didn't remember how he got out. The rest of the team later said they found him wandering through the woods just beyond the outer fence of the sanatorium grounds. His radio was off, his eyes were blank. He couldn't speak for nearly 4 hours. James Halperin was never found. An official investigation blamed disorientation due to smoke exposure and labeled it a tragic loss during an unsanctioned exploration of an unsafe site. But Darren knew better. He never returned to firefighting after that, retired early, and he's never, ever looked into a mirror in the dark since. A year later, my aunt found something disturbing. Folded into Darren's sock drawer was a photograph, old, burnt at the corners. No name, no date. It showed the isolation room, empty, and in the mirror's reflection was James Halperin, still standing there, still smiling, with a crowd of burned figures behind him. And someone, or something, was reaching out of the mirror toward the camera. We've all heard about haunted hospitals, ghost stories, urban legends. But some of them, they don't end when the place is boarded up or bulldozed. Some places remember, and they don't want to be forgotten. So if you ever find yourself near an abandoned hospital, don't go inside. And whatever you do, don't look in the mirrors.